Before a single word could be uttered, Hank was already kneeling beside him with a broom and dustpan. "Hey, it happens to everyone," Hank said calmly, sweeping up the shards. His voice was steady, his presence grounding. "No harm done." Eli stared at him, stunned, then muttered a breathless thank you, before scurrying off with the rest of the plates. As the sun dipped low and the dinner crowd began to arrive, the mood around Hank had already solidified. The whispers that began with suspicion had calcified into a story, a convenient label. Grayson's charity case, the man who didn't belong, the one they were expected to tolerate but never truly accept. Someone, no one knew exactly who, had even given him a nickname that started circulating in the back, Dumpster Dave. Everyone knew his real name was Hank, but no one seemed to care. No one, that is, except for the small security camera mounted quietly in the corner of the dry storage room, its tiny red light blinking steadily. And no one noticed the man watching the feed in real time from his office. Mr. Grayson sat alone in the glow of a desk lamp, his eyes fixed on the monitor, his face unreadable. Outside, the sky turned amber and gold, casting a warm glow through the front windows. Another dinner shift was about to begin at Grayson's bistro. And for Hank, the quiet man with a past no one cared to ask about, the real test of character was only just beginning. If there was ever a thing nobody could deny about Hank, it was his work ethic. He showed up at least 30 minutes early for every shift, no matter the weather, no matter the day. Not once did he complain, not even when Marcus, careless as ever, spilled an entire container of fish sauce across the floor Hank had just spent 20 minutes scrubbing. He didn't grumble, didn't flinch, just grabbed the mop again and started over. And somehow, even with a full load of thankless tasks, he always found time to help someone else who had fallen behind. "That guy doesn't take breaks like a normal person," Chef Lewis muttered one afternoon to his sous chef while reviewing inventory. "Just sits out back on the steps eating leftovers we toss." "Free labor," the sous chef shrugged. "But did you notice? He fixed the walk-in door hinge. Been sticking for months. He didn't even mention it, just did it." Luis didn't respond, but the thought lingered. Had those quiet acts of effort and initiative been noticed sooner, maybe things would have started to shift. Maybe perspectives would have changed. But out in the dining room, in a world ruled by appearance and perception, Hank had already been defined the moment he stepped through the kitchen door. A misfit, a disruption, an unspoken insult to their polished world. Zach in particular seemed to enjoy making Hank's life harder. On Tuesday, he went so far as to hide all the cleaning supplies in his car. From across the bar, he watched with barely concealed glee as Hank searched every utility closet, his brow creased but his body language steady, calm, patient. Finally, Hank approached the bar. "Hey, have you seen the mop head and all-purpose cleaner?" he asked, voice calm, like he was simply confirming inventory. Zach twirled a cocktail stir between his fingers and leaned in casually. "Ha ha, that's weird," he said, feigning concern. "Maybe check out back by the dumpster, might feel a bit more familiar." The servers nearby chuckled, quiet, but not quiet enough. Hank didn't react. No flash of anger, no biting retort. His expression didn't change, but in his eyes there was something else. A flicker of resigned understanding, like he'd heard it all before. Like the pain had long since dulled into a numb, familiar echo. "I'll look there," he said simply, then turned and walked away, not defeated, but as if he had long since accepted that certain battles were never his to win. From the espresso machine, Maya had seen it all. Her cheeks burned with shame, not for what she had done, but for what she hadn't stopped. When Hank disappeared out the back door, she walked straight over to Zach. "That was cruel," she said quietly. Zach scoffed and rolled his eyes. It was a joke, Maya. Lighten up. Not my fault the guy can't take a hint. He doesn't belong here. Feeling engaged. And she worked harder than you. She blurted out before she could stop herself. She regretted it the moment the words left her mouth. Zach's face darkened. Watch it, he said through gritted teeth. You know who writes the schedule when Grayson's not around, right? Would be a shame if someone lost their Saturday shifts. In the corner, Eli, the 17-year-old busboy, silently watched it all unfold. He was saving every cent for community college, and Grayson's paid better than any place that would hire someone his age. Just the day before, Eli had found a small brown paper bag tucked between two trash bins in the alley. Inside, a single sandwich. Hank's lunch. That afternoon, when no one was looking, Eli had quietly placed a shiny green apple next to it. No note, no acknowledgement, just kindness. But the small torments continued. Someone shoved a dirty mop head into Hank's locker. Plates were routinely passed to him without being scraped, forcing him to dig through half-eaten lemon wedges and soggy napkins with bare hands. A crude drawing appeared on the staff bulletin board, a bearded man sleeping inside a cardboard box labeled Employee Housing. And through it all, Mr. Grayson remained notably absent from the floor. From the outside, it looked like he was simply swamped with management, invoices, vendor calls, endless paperwork. But the blinking red lights on the security cameras told another story. They were watching everything. Late Thursday night, after a particularly grueling service, Hank found a note taped to his time card. The sidewalk is cleaner than your hands. Quit. He didn't react. He didn't tear it up or crumple it in disgust. Instead, he folded the paper carefully, like it was something valuable, and slipped it into his pocket. His face remained unreadable, his eyes calm. But inside the office, Mr. Grayson had watched the entire thing unfold on the security monitor, and for the first time, his usual warmth was gone, replaced by something cold, sharp, almost terrifying in its intensity. That night, when the last server had clocked out and the final dish was dried, Hank began to head toward the door. Grayson called to him. "Step into my office for a moment." Hank paused, then turned, shoulders squared but heavy, like he was bracing himself for bad news, maybe the worst. Maya had just stepped into the parking lot when she noticed the light on in Grayson's office. She couldn't hear anything, but she could see two silhouettes behind the blinds, one tall and still, the other hunched and waiting. 10 minutes passed. Then the door opened. Hank stepped out. Maya ducked behind her car instinctively, not wanting to be seen. But what stopped her wasn't guilt. It was confusion. Hank was smiling. Not a grin, not smug, but peaceful, quiet, unburdened. As he walked toward the bus stop under the soft streetlight, Maya swore he looked taller. The stoop in his back, so familiar by now, gone. It had all started the night before. That moment, that glass of red wine, that prank. The air had turned electric as it spilled down his chest, dripping from his beard like blood. In the breathless silence that followed, Maya had expected an explosion, a shout, a breakdown. But instead, Hank had raised his head. He looked directly at Amanda, then Zach, then each laughing face in turn. And his gaze, steady, solemn, held no rage, only disappointment. And that, somehow, was worse. It quieted the room more than a scream ever could. Without a word, Hank removed his soaked apron and folded it carefully. He laid it on an empty table, then turned and walked toward the kitchen, each step dignified, each drop of wine staining the floor like a silent testimony. Only 2 people moved. Eli rushed forward with a towel, handing it to Hank without speaking. Hank nodded once in thanks. She abandoned her table, her guests, her duties, and followed him. "That set you up," she whispered breathlessly in the back hall. Grayson never asked you to serve. He's not even here tonight." Hank looked at her, eyes sharp and painfully clear beneath the red-stained beard. "I know," he said softly, then turned, walked out the back door and disappeared into the night. In the kitchen, the staff had watched it all unfold on the security feed. No one spoke when Maya returned. Her cheeks flushed, not from guilt, but from knowing she had waited too long to act. And no one noticed the blinking red light on the dining room camera. No one, that is, except Mr. Grayson. And no one, absolutely no one, saw the small smile flicker across Hank's face as he vanished into the shadows. Saturday morning. The golden autumn light streamed through Grayson's tall windows like a silent blessing. By 10 a.m., the brunch shift was gathering. Laughter returned, bouncing off the walls like nothing had ever happened. "Did you see his face when the wine hit?" Jason crowed, practically slapping his knee as he recounted the story to the weekend hostess. "Worth every drop," Amanda grinned, fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror. "I think he finally got the message. Some people don't belong." Zach strolled in last, designer sunglasses perched arrogantly on his head, despite being indoors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, arms wide, "the greatest prank in Grayson's history." Their laughter was loud, but it stopped instantly when they turned the corner into the dining room. The chairs were still flipped upside down on tables, lights dim, but at the center of the room stood Mr. Grayson, arms folded, expression carved from granite. "Good morning," he said softly. "Nice to see everyone's in such high spirits." Confusion swept through the group like a cold draft. Wasn't he supposed to be gone all weekend? "I changed my plans," he said, as if reading their thoughts. There were more pressing matters here. He turned to the television mounted above the bar, usually reserved for big games. Today, it displayed a frozen image from the restaurant's security footage. "The restaurant will not be opening today," Grayson continued, his voice unsettlingly calm. "Instead, we're having a mandatory staff meeting." Chef Luis pushed open the swinging kitchen doors, his brow furrowing as he took in the unexpected sight of every staff member seated in silence. "What's going on?" he asked, scanning the room. "Perfect timing, Luis," Mr. Grayson replied without missing a beat. "Please, have a seat." The tension in the room was so thick it felt like it had substance, hanging in the air, pressing down on shoulders. Staff exchanged nervous glances, the kind shared when instinct says trouble is coming, but you don't know just how bad it is. Maya and Eli entered at that moment, freezing just inside the doorway, their steps faltering as they sensed the weight in the air. Neither spoke. They simply took their seats, quietly, aware they had walked into something that wasn't just another meeting. Mr. Grayson didn't speak again until every person was seated. Then, he picked up a small remote and aimed it at the large, flat screen mounted on the wall, usually reserved for sports games during special events. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly the room wasn't in the present anymore. It was reliving the past 3 weeks in painful clarity. High-definition footage captured Zach hiding the cleaning supplies in his trunk, Amanda taping a crude cartoon on the bulletin board, peals of laughter from servers watching Hank struggle to find what had been stolen from him. Every sneer, every smirk, every whispered insult, every act of humiliation. The clip ended with the wine incident, Hank drenched, frozen in the middle of the dining room like a target in a cruel game. No one spoke. Some shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. A few couldn't meet each other's eyes. The smugness that had once danced so confidently across faces now drained away, leaving only the bare bones of shame and disbelief. Grayson placed the remote gently on the table in front of him. "Interesting footage," he said, voice calm, steady, but there was steel in it, sharpened by anger and disappointment. 3 weeks. That's how long I've been watching, observing, listening. He paused, letting the silence do the work of shame. What I saw was a group of adults behaving like schoolyard bullies, cowards dressed in aprons. Amanda was the first to attempt damage control. It was just some harmless fun, Mr. Grayson. Hank understood that, I'm sure. Hank understood perfectly. He cut her off without raising his voice. But what I want to understand is who among you thought I would understand, or worse, excuse any of this. Zach chuckled nervously, attempting his trademark charm. Come on, boss. Maybe last night went a little too far, but Amanda... Zach, Grayson interrupted again, this time his voice quieter, more dangerous. You've been here 3 years. I've tolerated your attitude because your cocktails are flawless and the customers love you. But today, you crossed a line no one comes back from. Not here. He began calling names one by one. Jason, Tina, Marcus, several others, 9 in total. And with each name, his voice dropped lower, colder. I built this restaurant on 2 principles, he said. Excellence in cuisine and genuine hospitality. You can't have either in a toxic environment. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a stack of envelopes. This is your final paycheck, along with 2 weeks of severance. I'll confirm dates of employment for references if asked, but as of this moment, you are no longer part of this team. The room went still. Amanda opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Zach's face flushed with anger. You can't be serious. Never been more serious, Grayson replied, his voice like ice on glass. We have a full reservation list today, Louise cut in, clearly unsettled. Grayson's bistro is closed, he said. It will stay closed until I have a reason to open it again. For a homeless guy, Jason blurted. Grayson's composure cracked, just enough for the anger beneath to show. For every single moment you chose cruelty over compassion, he snapped. For every time you used your privilege to stomp on someone you decided didn't deserve respect. That's what you threw away, not me. Now, he said firmly, gather your things and leave. One by one they stood, some stunned, some defiant, all silent. The chairs screeched softly across the floor as they scraped backward. The door clicked behind each exit like punctuation marks in a story none of them expected to end this way. Only Maya and Eli remained. Grayson looked at them with a quieter gaze. You didn't participate, but you also didn't speak up. Maya's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have done more. I saw it all and barely did anything. Me too, Eli admitted, his voice barely audible as he stared at his trembling hands. Grayson nodded. You're right. You should have. But the cameras, they saw the quiet things too. He turned to Eli, an apple in a paper bag, a silent offering. Then to Maya, a towel offered without being asked, an attempt, however small, to stop unkindness. Those things, he said gently, speak as loudly as grand gestures. He glanced at the wall clock and, for the first time that morning, smiled. And now, I'd like you both to meet someone. The right way. He turned and pushed open the kitchen doors. And Hank stepped out. But he wasn't the man they had known. His posture was straight, his beard trimmed, his clothing clean and fitted. He looked like someone you'd trust with a restaurant. Or a second chance. Or a secret. And in a way, he was all of those things. Grayson looked at the 2 young employees and spoke again, his voice carrying something reverent. We're not just looking for people with skill. We're looking for people with character. People who treat others with dignity, no matter what they look like, or what they have or don't have. Maya's cheeks flushed with shame. Her voice cracked. I didn't do enough, she said. I saw everything, and I barely lifted a finger. Neither did I, Eli added, still looking at the floor. Henry smiled softly. His eyes, clear and calm, flickered with warmth. "But you did more than anyone else," he said gently. "Maya, I saw you redirect Zach's cruelty more times than you probably remember. Eli, that apple you left, it came on a day I was hungrier than I wanted to admit." He paused. Small kindnesses reveal character just as clearly as grand ones. Grayson nodded slowly. "And that's why you're both still here? We're opening 2 new restaurants in the city over the next 6 months, Henry added, stepping forward now not as the quiet dishwasher, but as a partner. "And we're going to need people we can trust to shape the culture from day one." Maya's head shot up, eyes wide. "Managers? But I'm just a server, and Eli's still in high school." "Titles and age don't matter as much as character and potential," Henry said firmly. "We can teach skills, but we can't teach decency." Eli sat up straighter. The words landed deep and lit something within him, but the doubt was still there. "You're offering us promotions," he said slowly, "even though we didn't stand up for you?" "You have conscience," Henry said, "and that's where courage begins. The rest can be built." Maya hesitated. Then she asked the question that had been growing in her chest for days. "But why go through all this? Why the tests, the cameras, the wine? Why not just interview people like normal?" Henry and Grayson shared a look. A shadow passed over Henry's face. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost like a confession. "Because over 20 years ago," he said, "before the success, before the chef's coat, before the restaurants, I was homeless." Maya's breath caught. "After a business failure and a divorce, I lost everything. For nearly 8 months, I slept in shelters, under bridges, wherever I could find safety. The world didn't see me, didn't want to." He ran a hand over his now clean-shaven face, a gesture from a different life. "And in that time, I learned something no resume can teach. How people treat you when they think you're nothing tells you everything about who they are." Grayson's voice cracked as he stepped forward and laid a hand on his friend's shoulder. "And I was the only one who gave Henry a job, washing dishes, because no one else would." He swallowed hard. "Harry saved my dying diner, with recipes passed down from his grandmother, and a business mind sharper than any knife I've ever used." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "So this wasn't just a test," she said softly. "It was personal." Henry nodded. "The restaurant business can be brutal," Henry said, his voice calm, steady, demanding customers, long hours, intense pressure. And when mutual respect isn't part of the foundation, it all starts to rot from the inside out. "But we've also seen something else," Grayson added, his gaze locked on Maya and Eli. "Kindness, when nurtured, can survive, even in the harshest of environments." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and her eyes widened. A new message in the old staff group chat. "Emergency meeting at Westside Cafe, calling Grayson's investors. Bring any proof of labor violations." Without hesitation, she held her phone out for Mr. Grayson to read. He scanned it silently. Henry, standing beside him, didn't flinch. He just smiled. "And that," Henry said quietly, "is exactly why you'll make an excellent manager, Maya." Eli sat up straighter, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. There was pride there now, and hope. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Henry buttoned his suit jacket with the ease of a man who had once climbed out of rock bottom and never forgot the view from down there. "Now," he said, with quiet authority, "now we rebuild. And we start with the 2 of you." Grayson nodded. "The restaurant will be closed for 2 weeks, he said. "Retraining, rebranding, a complete restart with a team that actually understands what this place is really about." Maya's voice was soft, uncertain. "And what is this place really about?" Grayson and Henry exchanged a glance and spoke in unison. More dignity. 2 weeks later, everything had changed. But not in the way outsiders might expect. The walls weren't just repainted, the light fixtures weren't just upgraded. The transformation wasn't about decor. It was about people and purpose. Henry Davis, once known as Hank, now simply and fully himself, showed up every morning, working alongside the team like he always had. Not as a dishwasher, not as a ghost, but as a mentor, a quiet pillar of resilience, a man who knew what it cost to be invisible and what it meant to be seen. Maya began to discover something surprising in herself, a natural sense of leadership. She interviewed every new hire personally, asking questions not about how many tables they'd served, but how they treated others when no one was watching. Ask them about the worst day they've had in this industry, Henry suggested during a coaching session. You'll learn far more from how they describe the people involved than from how they describe themselves. Eli, just 17, astonished everyone with his precision and insight. He completely redesigned the kitchen flow, creating an efficient, collaborative space. He stayed up late sketching diagrams and studying restaurant software. He treated it like his future depended on it. Because maybe it did. Your natural operations manager, Henry told him, reviewing his plans. That kind of mind, that can't be taught. One afternoon, after a long shift training new hires, Maya approached Henry as he adjusted a framed photo near the host stand, a black and white image of him and Grayson as teenagers, arms draped over each other's shoulders outside a tiny, forgotten diner. "Well, give us this chance," she asked softly. "I mean, we weren't cruel like the others, but we weren't exactly heroes either." Henry looked at the photo a long time before answering. "Redemption," he said, "isn't just for people who've done terrible things. Sometimes it's for those who recognize they could have done more good than they did." He looked at her, and that recognition, that quiet ache in your gut that says, "I should have done more," that's where growth starts. Opening night arrived. Above the front doors, a brand new sign gleamed under the evening sky. G&H Provisions, a tribute to a partnership made whole. Inside, golden light warmed the space. Familiar, but new. Friendly, but focused. The room buzzed with quiet energy, a harmony of purpose that had never existed before. Near the entrance, mounted on the wall for everyone to see, was a simple wooden plaque. No branding, no frills. Just one line, etched in gold. Kindness is the only true qualification here. 2 hours before the first guests arrived, Maya stood in her new navy blazer, pinning name tags onto crisp uniforms. Her staff, a carefully chosen mix of experienced servers and newcomers, included 2 people Henry had met during his time at the shelter. "Nervous?" Ellie asked, glancing up from his clipboard. The assistant manager tag on his shirt looked almost comically oversized on his teenage frame, but his quiet competence had already earned him respect in the kitchen. "Terrified?" Maya admitted, smiling nervously. "But the good kind of terrified, the kind that means this matters." Grayson and Henry emerged from the back office, both looking sharp, calm. All week they'd been fielding calls from reporters. The story had gone viral after a customer posted the wine-spilling video online. "The reservation book is packed for the next 3 weeks, Grayson said with a chuckle. "Not just because of the story. People believe in what we're doing." Henry nodded, then gestured toward the door. "Speaking of which, there's someone I'd like you to meet." He opened the door. A man in his early 30s stepped inside, thin, anxious, clutching a small canvas duffel. His eyes darted nervously. He looked like someone waiting to be turned away. "This is James," Henry said gently. "He'll be joining the team in the dish pit." And this time, no one laughed. No one whispered. only a quiet chorus of genuine welcomes. Maya stepped forward, something in James's trembling hands and lowered gaze sparking a memory in her chest. The first time she saw Hank. "Come with me," she said kindly. "I'll show you where to store your things. Staff meal is in 30 minutes. Chef Gabrielle makes the best pre-shift food in the city." That night, the restaurant hummed like a well-composed song. The new staff moved in sync, fluid and focused. When a new server misfired on an order, there were no rolled eyes, just quiet support. When the pressure rose, no one snapped. They stepped in. They stepped up. Near closing time, Henry found Maya standing near the bar, watching the dining room with the tired, satisfied gaze of someone who had earned their exhaustion. "You did good tonight," he said. She turned, her smile soft, real. "It feels like we're building something that actually matters." Henry nodded slowly. "That's how Richard and I felt 20 years ago. The food business," he said, "is really the people business. Everything else, just noise." The next morning, a local news team arrived. As his cameras set up, Henry pulled Maya and Eli aside. "They're going to want to talk to you too," he said. "You're a part of this story." Eli looked stunned. "But we didn't do anything special." Henry smiled. "In a world where cruelty is ordinary, even basic kindness becomes extraordinary." He paused. "Remember that when you're running your own restaurant someday." Maya blinked. "Own restaurants?" Henry grinned. "That's the real expansion plan. Grow people, not just locations. Find the ones with heart and skill. Train them and help them become owners." As the camera light blinked on, ready to record the story that had captivated the city, Maya caught sight of James behind the bar. He was polishing glasses, clean-shaven now, dressed neatly, standing tall. He met her eyes and nodded. And in that moment, Maya understood. They weren't just running a restaurant. They were building a sanctuary, a second chance, a quiet revolution, one act of dignity at a time. As the camera panned across the entrance, it landed on the plaque once more. "Kindness is the only true qualification here." Words that had changed everything. The first rays of morning light barely pierced through the towering glass windows of Grayson's Bistro when the staff began trickling in for their pre-shift meeting. The restaurant was tucked neatly between a high-end fashion boutique and an artisanal coffee house on Maple Avenue, a part of the city not quite downtown but upscale enough to attract the city's discerning crowd. People who cared as much about ambiance as they did about the food. Inside, everything exuded elegance and precision. Crisp white tablecloths stretched taut across each table. Silverware gleamed like it had been polished by moonlight, and the waitstaff looked like they'd been curated from the pages of a lifestyle magazine. Amanda, the head server, was carefully twisting her golden hair into a flawless bun while chatting effortlessly with Zach, the sharp-eyed bartender whose coveted weekend shifts were more a product of family connections than cocktail mastery. Together they were the face of what the kitchen staff jokingly referred to as the runway crew, front-of-house employees who treated every service like a fashion show, each step rehearsed, every smile timed. "Did you see what Table 7 tipped last night?" Amanda beamed, flashing her camera-ready smile. $200 on a 500 check. Zach nodded, still scrolling casually through his phone. "I'm telling you, it's all about the personal connection. No one tips big when the server looks like they don't belong here," Zach added, his tone laced with a subtle edge, not cruel, but unmistakably condescending. Their conversation came to an abrupt halt when the office door swung open and Mr. Grayson stepped out. Unlike most restaurant owners who dressed to impress, Richard Grayson was the embodiment of understated authority. He wore a neatly pressed chain button-down and dark jeans, not because he couldn't afford better, but because he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty clearing spills or scrubbing a stubborn stain, if the moment called for it. At 52, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines etched into the corners of his eyes, Richard didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. He was respect carved into flesh and bone. "All right, everyone, eyes up," he said in a voice that was both warm and unyielding. "Before we dive into today's specials and reservation list, I'd like to introduce someone new." A subtle tension rippled through the room. All eyes turned toward the office door, brows lifting in curiosity. New hires at Grayson's were rare. The wait list to work here rivaled that of some Ivy League internships. Then the door opened again, and what stepped out was not at all what they expected. A man, perhaps in his late 40s, stepped in slowly, his posture hunched, whether from cold or embarrassment no one could say. His eyes stayed glued to the polished concrete floor, as if afraid that one look from the staff might cause him to evaporate. His flannel shirt hung loose over a narrow frame, faded and thinned in the creases from years of wear. His hands were calloused, skin cracked around the knuckles, fidgeting like they had nowhere to rest. Silence fell across the room. Even the usual clatter from the kitchen paused as line cooks leaned out through the service window to get a better look. "This is Hank," Mr. Grayson announced, resting a firm but respectful hand on the man's sloped shoulder. "He's joining the back-of-house team as a kitchen assistant, starting today." The silence deepened, not from shock, but discomfort. A thick fog of unspoken judgment filled the room. Amanda raised a perfectly sculpted brow, exchanging a glance with Zach. His grin faltered, replaced by a smirk of polite confusion, the kind that cloaked disapproval in a thin layer of forced courtesy. In Amanda's mind, a string of questions screamed silently. Why would Grayson, of all people, hire someone like that? At a place where even table linens were steamed to perfection, this man looked like he hadn't seen a proper home in years. She tried not to stare, but there was something strange tugging at her. Not pity, but something older, deeper, a flicker of recognition she couldn't place. Back in the kitchen, Marcus, one of the line cooks, muttered under his breath, causing the dishwasher beside him to snicker. Mr. Grayson continued, his voice still calm, either unaware or deliberately ignoring the reactions. "Hank has prior kitchen experience. He'll be helping with prep, cleaning, and any task Chef Luis needs handled. I expect everyone here to treat him with the same respect you give one another." No one spoke, not out of agreement, but because no one quite knew what to say. Chef Luis, the head chef, finally cleared his throat, a sharp, controlled sound like someone snapping the tension in half. "Welcome aboard," he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. "Prep starts in 10. I'll show you the layout." Grayson gave a quiet nod and returned to his office. Hank followed Chef Luis, shoulders tight, gait slow, and the weight of every gaze burning into his back. As soon as the office door shut, the silence cracked open. "You're kidding, right?" Amanda whispered, leaning toward Zach and a pair of other servers. "That guy sleeps under the overpass off the river. I know I've seen him there." Zach smirked. "I just hope my car's still in the parking lot after tonight," he said, half laughing, but the tension in his voice betrayed he wasn't entirely joking. Meanwhile, the kitchen wasn't exactly rolling out a red carpet either. Chef Luis led Hank to a small metal locker in the back corner. "You can keep your stuff in here," he said flatly. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't know what kind of charity case you are to the boss, but in my kitchen, you either pull your weight or you're gone. Got it?" Hank met his eyes just briefly, a flicker of calm, almost grateful acknowledgement. "Yes, chef, thank you for the opportunity." Luis blinked, caught slightly off guard by the quiet strength in Hank's voice. It wasn't what he expected. It was too clear, too grounded, like it came from someone who had survived far more than this. "All right then, start with mopping the walk-in, then the bathrooms. After that, check with Marcus about the grease trap." If Hank noticed that he was being assigned all the jobs no one else wanted, he didn't show it. He just nodded, turned toward the supply closet, and got to work. If Hank realized he was being assigned only the jobs no one else wanted, tasks most people avoided like the plague, he didn't show it. He simply nodded, quiet and calm, then walked over to the utility closet, grabbed a mop, and got to work without protest. That entire first morning, Hank moved through the restaurant like a ghost, present but almost invisible. He scrubbed grime from behind baseboards no one else bothered to notice. He disinfected corners so thoroughly that the walk-in fridge glistened like chrome. The bathrooms gleamed, their porcelain surfaces bright enough to reflect the overhead lighting and the grease trap. Untouched for weeks, despite health code warnings, was cleaned out meticulously, layer by vile layer, without a single word of complaint. From the front station, Amanda occasionally glanced into the kitchen, watching Hank from a distance, her brow furrowed in confusion. What in the world was Mr. Grayson thinking? "This is a fine dining restaurant, not a homeless shelter," she muttered under her breath to Tina, who was folding napkins into elaborate swan shapes. Tina shrugged. Maybe they know each other, or maybe it's some kind of court-ordered community service. "I just hope he stays out of the dining room," Amanda replied, shaking her head. "If customers see him, they're going to think we've lowered our standards." The lunch rush came and went in a blur of footsteps, clinking plates and shouted orders. Through it all, Hank worked silently in the background. When the dish machine backed up, he jumped in to wash by hand. When a tray spilled in the back hallway, he was there with a mop before anyone else noticed. When the silverware bins ran low, he hustled fresh utensils to the pass without being asked. He never once paused to rest or checked his phone like the other staff members, who always managed to sneak off for bathroom breaks that conveniently aligned with Instagram scrolls. For Hank, the work wasn't a job. It was an anchor, a lifeline, a way to stay upright in a world that seemed to prefer him forgotten. By mid-afternoon, as the lunch crowd trickled out and the buzz died down, Mr. Grayson finally emerged from his office. He'd spent the better part of the day reviewing ledgers and invoices, but something, intuition maybe, guided him to the dry storage room. There he found Hank. The cramped, dimly lit room, usually a mess of unmarked boxes and jumbled shelves, now looked almost pristine. Labels faced outward. Inventory was sorted and stacked with precision. "How's your first day going?" Mr. Grayson asked gently, his tone noticeably softer than the one he used with the rest of the staff. Hank straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. Beneath the layer of beard and grime, a faint smile broke through. "Good, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." "You don't need to call me sir," Grayson replied with a small smile. "Just call me Grayson, like everyone else." Hank nodded without replying. His pale blue eyes, startling in their clarity, met Grayson's just long enough to convey something unspoken. There was no bitterness in them, no anger, just pride. Quiet, dignified, painfully human. Grayson paused, watching him for a moment longer. "The staff, they'll come around. They're good people. Deep down, sometimes it just takes time." "I'm used to this," Hank said simply, then turned back to restock another shelf. As Grayson walked away, he passed by the service station where Zach was showing Amanda something on his phone. The two were doubled over, laughing. The moment they saw him, they stiffened like teenagers caught passing notes in church. "What's so funny?" Grayson asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Oh, just a meme, boss," Zach replied quickly, tucking his phone into his apron pocket. Grayson stared at him for a moment longer than necessary, then nodded slowly. "Dinner prep starts in 20. Let's stay focused." As he walked off, Amanda leaned closer to Zach and whispered, "You think he saw it?" Zach shook his head confidently. No way, just a joke. Bring your homeless friend to work day? He wouldn't get it even if he did see it. But just a few feet away, Maya, the youngest server on staff, had heard everything. She froze mid-step, tray in hand, her eyes drifting toward the dry storage room. Toward Hank. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. Instead, she turned and walked back to her station, wiping down wine glasses with trembling hands. In the kitchen, a shy teenage busboy named Eli was struggling with a stack of heavy ceramic plates. One slipped, then another, and within seconds, an avalanche of white porcelain shattered across the floor. He braced himself, his face already cringing in anticipation of Chef Luis's famous wrath. But the yelling never came.